everyone. Welcome to week 4. So we're going to start kind of diving into our unit on animal rights. So the first question when we're talking about animal rights is, well, why do we even care? Why do we give animals rights? There's been many arguments. One of them kind of centers around the concept of sentience, being sentient, so the ability to feel pain, pleasure, having a form of reason and thought. Many people have argued kind of throughout the years that there's an argument that animals similar to humans are sentient, mammals in particular. We tend to oftentimes, when we see animals, even our pets, that they act in a way that seems that, yes, they can respond to pain, they enjoy certain things, maybe they have certain toys that they like, and we think that they have some measure of awareness of themselves. That's what we refer to as sentiency. So when we're thinking of the different types of animals, so mammals, birds, fish, things like that, what should be our line for protecting each of these types of animals? Out of the animals that we can think of, who do you think deserves more rights? Who deserves less? Thinking in terms of domesticated animals, wild animals, what about insects? Just a little bit of food for thought on kind of when we are thinking of rights, because it's human beings who are giving rights to these animals. These animals aren't advocating for their own rights. It's just kind of something to think about. So just a quick sort of overview of some of the history of animal rights. This is going to be really quick. There's so much stuff about animal rights and the concepts of arguing, kind of what we're talking about in this unit. We're just going to touch on a few of them. So the first one, obviously, Aristotle. So way back. So Aristotle's whole argument was, he stated that animals lack reason and are therefore below humans in the natural world order. Kind of an interesting sort of thing, because they were delving into kind of, well, who's kind of at the top of all of this. And Aristotle said, nope, it's definitely humans. We have the most logical brains, and therefore, because animals lack rights, we have right to rule over them. Jumping forward many decades, in Ireland in 1635, there started to be looks at advocating for animals, that they started prohibiting like just tearing wool off of sheep or attaching plows to horses' tails. It was referred to as cruelty used to beasts. So acknowledging, hey, when you're doing this to an animal, that's not nice. That's being cruel or mean. We jump forward a little bit to John Locke, who argued that animals did have feelings, and it was unnecessarily cruel if you were mean to them, that was morally wrong. However, the rights were actually not to the animals. It was an owner's responsibility to be kind to those animals. And it was the human being who was doing the damage by being cruel. So the animals themselves didn't necessarily have rights, but we're moving towards that. Then we have in 1822 an act that was passed preventing cruelty to larger domestic animals such as horses and cattle. Then we have in 1824, so 2 years later, the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, which we now refer to as the SPCA, to help enforce this law, to prevent people from being mean to animals. Now, obviously, the SPCA has changed a lot since kind of this starting point, but basically in its basic form, it's meant to help support animals who can't speak for themselves. Obviously, then we have a little bit later, 1866 in America, we have Henry Bergh, who organized the first American SPCA in New York. Then we're going to jump again to the 1980s, where there was a new group called the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, which we now know as PETA, and all of the interesting controversy that comes with that. Then we have in 1999, New Zealand passed an Animal Welfare Act that had the effect on banning experiments on non-human hominids. That basically means primates. So this is really interesting, because this gets into the ethical discussion of, should we be allowed to test products on animals for scientific advancement? Just some thought. Then some interesting things. So in 2009, there were several countries that actually outlawed the use of animals at circuses. Places like Bolivia, some of the European countries, Scandinavia, parts of the Middle East, and Singapore all banned in some way animals in the circus because they felt that that sort of act was cruel towards those animals, making them forced to perform and whatnot. This is just kind of an interesting map. A worldwide laws regarding the formal recognition of non-human animal sentiency and suffering. Just to kind of look, so if we look at Canada, so what it's showing for Canada for these statistics is this is national recognition of animal suffering. So being aware that yes, animals can suffer and we should be preventing that from happening. All the way to the part where some places partially recognize this or partially recognize that yes, animals have sentiency, so the awareness of themselves. And all of these make decisions on what sort of laws will be put in place to protect animals. So we're just going to quickly go through this, just some stuff about Canada and some of the acts that we have. So there's the Animal Protection Act, which says there has to be a burden of proof. So reasonable doubt that somebody acted in a cruel way towards an animal. So the offense allowing or causing an animal to be in distress, and the maximum penalty can be $20,000 and being prohibited from owning or caring for animals. This is just saying in the criminal code itself. The other one I believe is only for Ontario. And again, same sort of thing is we do have laws in Canada that protect animals and you can be charged. So for this one, the maximum penalty, 5 years incarceration, $10,000 fine, prohibiting someone from owning or caring for animals. Now, one group of animals that oftentimes, sometimes we forget about, because when we think about animal rights, we think of like animals in the wild or our own pets. But there's also animals that are being transported for the purpose of, well, either human consumption or as products and things like that. So there are laws in Canada preventing overcrowding, certain types of containers, proper ventilation, food and water for the animals. But there are some issues to this. The problem is there's no clear guidelines for some of this stuff. It's great to say, hey, don't mistreat the animals, but to what extent? There have been cases, you can find them pretty much all over the internet, animals being transported where the containers they're in are really, really hot and the animals get heat stroke. There are also times where there has been exceeded the recommendation of numbers of animals being loaded and unloaded and things like that. It's just kind of some interesting things in the fact that if our basis for animal rights is not doing harm to animals, that's a really big gray area. And some of the laws that kind of put in place to kind of help this are still kind of working out some of that. So this just goes into some of the other things that the transport can lead to pain and suffering of animals. So if your basis for giving rights to animals is you can't do intentional pain or suffering, this is doing that. So I just threw a bunch of information at you. So let's look at the 2 assignments that you have for this week. So what I would like you to do for the first assignment, it can be in point form, is I want you to look at what are the issues facing these 4 groups of creatures. So we have domesticated pets, pets in captivity, so that's zoos, aquariums, wild animals on conservation land, and wild animals in the ocean. There are definitely groups that I haven't included in here, but I just wanted you to look at these ones. I also want you to think about what sort of specific rights do you think this animal group should have, because it's going to be a little bit different. Some of them, there might be some overlap, but think really carefully about what does that specific group need as rights. And the last part is how can humans actually support the rights of this group? And it's not just making posters. Think a little bit beyond that. So these are just examples from number 1 that I just did in point form. So things like for domesticated pets, owner neglect, or being forced to perform at events, issues if conservation land changes in size, or human causes such as pollution. So the second assignment that we're going to do, I'm really excited and hoping that this is going to work. I'm hoping to show you guys on Thursday the movie Blackfish. Probably most of you know a little bit about this movie. So Blackfish was a 2013 documentary that was looking at some concerns with SeaWorlds, and it specifically follows one killer whale. His name is Tilikum. And Tilikum is an orca that was held in captivity, and there was a lot of controversy around it. It's a really well kind of designed movie. It's a nice documentary. It definitely has some violent parts. Tilikum, I believe, is responsible for at least 3 documented deaths kind of throughout his life. So the movie is going to be on Thursday at 2 p.m. And what I'm hoping to do is I'm hoping to run it through an app called Cosme. I don't know how to pronounce it, but essentially what it is I'm going to be sharing it. I tried a bunch of other apps and they didn't really work, which is unfortunate. David suggested Rave, and I could not for the life of me figure out how to get my copy of Blackfish onto Rave in a way that would work, and it turns out Blackfish isn't on Netflix anymore, which is really annoying. So I'm hoping to show you guys the movie on Thursday. We're going to start it at 2 p.m. And then if you come in a little bit late, you're just going to miss part of the movie, but there will be some questions for it. So there are 2 parts to the questions for the Blackfish movie. One of them is I want you to brainstorm some questions before the movie on Thursday. These can be anything from if you've seen Blackfish, maybe you might ask some questions about the second time around, kind of whatever comes to mind when you see just a little blurb about Blackfish. Afterwards, all I want is a 100 to 150 word paragraph about the movie, and that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to contact me. If not, I will see you guys on Thursday. Bring some snacks. The documentary movie is about, I think it's like an hour and 40 minutes or something like that. It's also nice because we'll be able to actually talk in the chat on the side. As the movie is happening. Well, we'll see. I'm hoping that the speed will be fast enough that my computer's capture screen should play the movie okay. You know what? Fingers crossed, we will make it work. So I'll see you guys on Thursday.